Thank you very much for taking the time to join us in watching this little presentation, multi-part as it is, on editing. Before we get into that, perhaps it would be a good idea if I just mention to you what my editing approach is. Basically, my editing approach is a reasonably simple one. Concern ourselves today is a landscape. As you can see, this is a fairly dull image, a little bit underexposed, needing quite a lot of work. So let's decide what it has to do. By the way, this image was nearly deleted, so I'm using it as a very good example of a landscape that has some merit, although at the moment it certainly doesn't appear like it. Its metadata, it was shot at 4 seconds, f11, ISO 100. So let's have a look. The first thing I do is I immediately look at the horizon. Is the horizon level? In landscapes, absolutely vital. You'll see what I've clicked there, and it appears to be reasonably level. The next thing I'm going to say to myself is the sky doesn't add a lot of value, so I'm going to change that to a slightly more panoramic crop. I'm going to apply something, because the skies are interesting there, I'm going to apply what you could call roughly the rule of fifths. So I'm only allowing a fifth of it to be the sky, and there it is. I'm happy with it. I'm double clicking on that, which has the same effect as having pressed this done key. Image was shot fairly warm but doesn't show an awful lot of color, so I'm going to push the Kelvin value or color temperature up a bit, add a little bit of red to it, a little bit of character starts to come into it. I'm then going to solve that under exposure, which you can see on your Instagram, on your histogram there, to bring the exposure up slightly, but not enough to cause those whites to worry me. Then I'm going to bring up the contrast levels a touch. I'm going to bring the highlights down, the whites down, shadows up a little, see where those dark areas start to pick up, as well as the blacks up a little bit. Bring in a little bit of texture, a little bit of clarity, touch of dehaze, a little bit of vibrance, and you can see this image is beginning to come alive a little. I'm then going to take the colors, I'm going to slightly more shift the reds, add the oranges up a little, which I'm going to saturate slightly, bring the luminance in darker, a little bit left towards the orange on the yellow channel, and increase saturation, bring down luminance a little, watch the water, there's that hue coming through nicely on the water. I'm then going to get rid of the sharpening, because any sharpening that needs to be done I'm going to do in Photoshop. Then I'm going to remove these two lens profile and chromatic aberration. You can already see this is looking a little bit better. And then feel that this is still a little bit overexposed. I'm going to go to this little tool called the graduated filter here, your middle tool on all these tools, or rather I should say your fourth one out of 7. I'm going to click on it, and I'm just going to drag my mouse down, and I'm going to show you where it will affect how. That is what it will affect. So it will be most here, fading off to there. What I'm then going to do, I'm going to take that exposure, let's tick that off so we can see what we're doing, and I'm going to reduce the exposure. I'm going to reduce the shadows. I'm going to reduce the black slightly, in with the texture, a little bit of clarity, a little bit of saturation. I'm not very happy. I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to bring in a color effect there. I'm going to bring that in. See how that warms it up? Let's then bring up its saturation, and it's now darkened these clouds here. It's now brought through quite a nice sunrise color there. So let's, for a rough edit, call this that I'm happy. I'm then going to go to this tool, the second to last one from the right. It's called a radial filter, and as I stretch it, you will see what it does. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to take its little cross, and I'm just going to drag down, then going to reposition the mouse, bring that across till it's nicely covering a substantial amount of that plate. Let me just show you by ticking show selected mask there. That is where it's working. I can take it in just a touch. Now, that is the area that I am affecting at the moment. Let me pull it down a bit. Now, that is substantially over that mask. Take that off so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click exposure. I'm then going to slightly bring up the exposure. Do you see what that water on that plate is doing? It's looking really, really appealing. I'm then going to bring the shadows up slightly, and it's starting to look really nice now. It's starting to show life. It's starting to show contrast. It's starting to show what I call a little bit of bounce. It's starting to get appealing. You'll notice none of my sliders are being moved to pieces here. I'm moving them nicely and gently. When I'm done, I can either double click here inside, or I can click here, done. Now, I'm a lot happier with this. So what am I going to do next? I'm going to take this image into Photoshop. I'll just show you how I'm going to do that, and then we're going to move to the next part of this little tutorial. So I'm going to end it here. I hit Photo, Edit In, click, and click on Open as Smart Object in Photoshop. Why the Smart Object? So that I can go back and make any corrections that I might have needed from what I've done in Lightroom in something called Adobe Camera Raw, which is exactly the same engine as what drives Lightroom and also drives Photoshop. Thank you very much for watching thus far, and I'll begin again with the little segment in Photoshop. Thank you.